On the night of June 12, 1964, a single Dakota was droning slowly over dense, triple canopy jungle. Anxious faces bathed in a sudden green light, the 8 men inside stepped through the open door and out into the void, olive-drab parachutes blossoming above them as they descended to Route 9 in Laos. This is the story of Project Delta and Operation Leaping Lena. This channel's mission is to challenge the Vietnam orthodoxy. Much of what you know about the Vietnam War is either incomplete or false. To support this channel and its mission, please subscribe and like the video. Oplan 98-64. Policy on cross-border missions was subject to much discussion between November 1963 and May 1964 due to a disagreement between diplomats and the military on how the war should be conducted. The JCS finally authorised MACV to begin joint planning with the South Vietnamese. Oplan 98-64 outlined an ambitious programme of ground patrols in Laos, intended to provide evidence of communist infiltration into South Vietnam. The plan also called for the development of an interdiction effort. MACV selected the Tchepone area as the operation's primary target, an area of operations previously opposed by the US Ambassador to Laos, William H. Sullivan. Lightning bolts. Oplan 98-64 called for 8-man teams to conduct 30-day operations in Laos. MACV selected volunteers from South Vietnamese Special Forces Group 31, commanded by Major Pham Z Tat, which had been training in the Zanang area for border surveillance operations. The 4 companies of the 11th Airborne Ranger Battalion, led by Major Chan Ning Hui, would act as a reaction force for the reconnaissance elements as part of their duties. In late March, Captain William Richardson, a veteran of the White Star program in Laos, and at that time MACV Special Forces liaison for teams working in the Free Corps area, met with 5th Group Commanding Officer Colonel Leonard and Deputy Lieutenant Colonel Vining. Richardson was to construct a camp, select advisory staff, conduct the necessary training to insert teams by parachute, and be ready to be operational in 1 month. Although Richardson questioned the short time frame and parachute insertion, preferring insertion by helicopter, he accepted the challenge. The 3 lightning bolts of the US Special Forces insignia represented a capability of conducting missions by land, air and sea, and as the points of a triangle also represented this, Richardson named the new unit Project Delta. Training at Nha Trang. Construction began on a compound at the end of the runway at Nha Trang, and 5 H-34s and 2 C-47s were allocated to Delta. The aircraft were flown by US-trained pilots, mostly Vietnamese, but their numbers included at least 1 North Korean and 1 Chinese pilot. Richardson was also given half an A-team from Okinawa and half a dozen men already in South Vietnam with 5th Special Forces Group. 2 US Special Forces personnel were assigned to each Delta team, and the teams conducted extensive training, which included parachute drops into dense triple canopy jungle, followed by several days of live fire patrol exercises. T-7 parachutes, which had limited maneuverability, were used, and bulky radio equipment was dropped in a separate parachute, making assembly on the ground a significant challenge. Analysis of aerial photography of the drop zones was also difficult, as triple canopy jungle and knee-high scrub could be confused, and this confusion was responsible for several injuries and at least 1 death. Richardson continued to argue for helicopter insertions, but without success, and with the time allowed for preparation exhausted, he declared the teams ready for the operation, codenamed Leaping Lena. The objective was to collect information on enemy activity, including the movement of trucks, artillery and heavy equipment, and to detect signs of troop movement of units such as companies or battalions. The LLDB teams were expecting the US advisors to jump with them into Laos, and they became demoralised when the advisors were ordered not to cross the border. The South Vietnamese believed the presence of the US advisors was a guarantee that air assets and fire support would be made available. However, all of the 40 volunteers would jump into Laos. Leaping Lena. The first 2 teams boarded C-47s on the night of June 24, 1964, and prepared for insertion along Route 9 near Tchepone. Team 1 jumped at 400 feet and descended into the trees. Sergeant Hay, Team 1 leader, lowered himself to the ground and discovered that his second in command was missing, with the remainder of the team scattered. After assembling the team, Hay attempted to make radio contact with Richardson's command group in Khe Sanh, but without success. Team 2 aborted their mission due to poor navigation. The next night, Teams 2, 3 and 4 were inserted south of Route 9. However, only a single transmission from Team 2 was received. Team 5 was inserted north of Nyong Nong on June 27th. Immediately making contact with enemy forces, the team leader was killed and the team withdrew towards the border. Team 1 also made contact on the 27th, evading towards the border with South Vietnam. Richardson continued his attempts to establish communication with the teams, but with little success. One team made contact through Saigon, requesting a resupply that would include several bottles of wine. When Saigon questioned this request, Richardson replied that whatever the men on the ground asked for should be provided to them. Returning to Nha Trang, Richardson joined the resupply mission, and despite a series of violent thunderstorms, the team was located and resupplied in a low-altitude parachute drop. Communication with all of the teams was then lost, and Richardson organised an intense search effort. His staff would patrol the border by air, while local villagers would search for any survivors that had escaped to the border. Sergeant Hay and 3 other members of Team 1 would later be recovered, and 2 members of Team 5 would also make it to the border. Of the 40 men parachuted into Laos, between 5 and 9 returned, the rest presumed captured or missing. One man had crashed through a house roof on landing, while another landed in dense scrub and died on impact, and several others had been handed over to the enemy by villagers after the men had given them the gold coins issued to help them evade capture. One of the teams had decided to ambush a convoy of 7 vehicles, but after destroying the convoy, the team was pursued and eventually captured. Aftermath. Leaping LENA was regarded as a failure, but information provided by returning members revealed that the Tchepone area was alive with enemy forces, with many of them wearing NVA uniforms. Each road culvert and bridge had at least 2 enemy soldiers guarding it, and roads previously undetected by air were discovered. Movement of convoys along the roads was also detected. Units as large as battalions were observed, including one battalion that was discovered crossing the border into South Vietnam to the west of Khe Sanh, and approximately 30 sampans were also spotted moving company-sized units across the border. The teams had identified a significant amount of enemy activity astride Highway 9. But hard lessons had also been learned. The missions had been planned to last 30 days, but within 9 days all the teams had been compromised. Future missions would have an optimum planned duration of 3 to 5 days. In his after-action report, Richardson recommended that teams should be accompanied by US advisors, that they should be inserted by helicopter, and he also suggested that operations should be conducted inside South Vietnam, making it easier to provide direct support. When he returned to Nha Trang, Richardson discovered that Special Forces Detachment B1110, having arrived from Okinawa on June 12th, had been assigned to take over Project Delta. Training continued, but due to losses incurred during Leaping LENA and a lack of familiarity and trust with the new advisors, in late July unrest among the LLDB led to an armed standoff with US Special Forces personnel. But events in the Gulf of Tonkin were about to create a new urgency for intelligence gathering operations, and a renewed Project Delta would lead the reconnaissance effort.